Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, since we have a culture minister with us, let's talk about the TV licence fee in the over 75s, because the BBC is exploring plans to persuade pensioners who currently don't pay the licence fee to opt into it. Is that a good idea?
Well, I mean, it's up to the BBC, who are now responsible for the free TV licence fee. I got an email from a constituent this morning who said they would willingly pay the over 75s licence fee. They are over 75, obviously, and I've had conversations with other pensioners, people over the age of 75, who said they wouldn't. But I think it's perfectly within the BBC's rights. Now it's responsible for the free television licence to ask people if they want to make a voluntary contribution.
And you'd be comfortable with that idea, and with a campaign that's been talked about, fronted by celebrities, to persuade pensioners over 75 to pay for their own TV licences?
As I say, I mean, the BBC is now responsible for it. We reached agreement with them that they would take on the free television licence, and if they want to ask people to make a voluntary contribution, that's entirely a matter.
Are you worried that your post bag will become full of complaints from pensioners who feel they're being put under pressure here?
No, I don't. That didn't occur to me. As I say, I think I get a lot of emails from my constituents about the BBC. People care passionately about the BBC's future. They want to have a say in it. We've had the second largest consultation we've ever had as a government on the future of the BBC, and I imagine this will be part of that debate.
Yes, they care about it, and many of them, I suspect, were unhappy with a decision that really was palming off a difficult welfare decision for the government and putting it onto the BBC.
Well, I think it's right the BBC, as it were, has wholesale responsibility for its financing, and part of the financing of the BBC is free television licences for pensioners.
Why didn't you make that decision? Why didn't the government make that decision about over 75?
Well, we reached an agreement with the BBC that they would take on responsibility for it, and we also said to them that they were free, as it were, to remove that after the 5-year period which we guaranteed in our manifesto, and they're also free, as they're doing now, to engage with people over the age of 75 and say, would you like to make a contribution to the BBC's
But it's the government that's
costs?
accountable to voters, isn't it? You are the
well,
ones
the
that should
BBC
make
is
those sorts of
accountable. The
decisions.
BBC is accountable to Parliament, so it's accountable to voters through Parliament, but it's also accountable to people through the payment of the licence fee. People have to pay their licence fee, and therefore the BBC has a direct relation with the licence fees. And it's very important to say that the BBC is independent. I mean, Andrew quipped that somehow I have some say over his future, but actually the BBC should be independent of government.
Well, it should
and
be.
one of the ways that goes is by the financing it through the licence fee rather than through, say, general taxation.
Well, which services then do you think the BBC should cut to fund this scheme when it comes online? It's to the tune of £600 million.
Well, again, I don't think ministers should tell the BBC what services to cut, which is a slightly sort of pejorative way of putting it.
But you made an agreement and a decision to foist
I think the
this on
BBC
the
has to
BBC.
look at all its services and decide which ones it wants to maintain and are most effective. It's made a recent decision, for example, to move BBC 3 from linear television to online, but part of the justification was that, say, more and more people are going online to view. Let's, as it were, get ahead of the curve, have a well-established brand that we move online, which is aimed at younger viewers, and learn lessons about how to engage with people online in terms of viewing content.
Kate, did you support that initial decision and agreement, as Ed Vaizey calls it, between the BBC and government for the BBC to actually fund the over 75s TV licence?
I think what's really important to recognise is that the BBC is a public service broadcaster, and so we've got to make sure that it's on a sustainable financial footing. And that's a government concern, a government responsibility, because we all rely on the BBC as independent and impartial and informative. As far as this initiative around the over 75s is concerned, I think we've got to be concerned. First of all, it may not raise very much money and may be quite bureaucratic to implement, so the gains may be very, very marginal. But I'd be particularly concerned, and this is my concern, about the transferring of the funding onto the BBC, and therefore they've got to find that money somewhere. If this starts to exclude already very marginalised pensioners, many of them find the television an absolute lifeline. They can't get out of the house. They need the BBC. We really need to be very careful about the impact of these kind of changes.
It would be voluntary. Certainly it seems at the moment. A campaign by celebrities, though, to persuade pensioners, do you think that would be seen by some as bullying almost?
I hope it wouldn't be seen as bullying, and I hope nobody will feel offended when I say that some pensioners, though, could be confused. They may not get the message clearly. They may not understand that it is a voluntary option, that they don't have to go out and make a contribution. So I am concerned. I understand why the BBC are looking at every single possibility to raise money, but I do think that this could impact very harshly on some vulnerable people.
What about other pensioner benefits? Because certainly in the run-up to the election, Labour were looking, or certainly said they would be reviewing pensioner benefits that were given right across the board. Should that be looked at again?
If I'm honest, we were really miserable about pensioners before the election. What we talked about wasn't very joyful. It wasn't about the enjoyment of your retirement, about, you know, a happy and fulfilling lifestyle. And I think what we've got to remember is pensioners span a very wide age range now. You know, women and men in their 60s and 70s are living a very different kind of life from those in their 80s and 90s.
Should well-off pensioners still get those benefits?
So I think it is really important that we do review across the piece the way in which benefits are structured for older people, how they can support those older people who want to carry on working through their 60s and 70s, and many do, to gain from employment, but also to be sure that they've got a secure income for their retirement. And I think we've got to make sure that those who are finding it most difficult to save for retirement, women, those in low-paid work, are properly protected. So I'm absolutely in favour of a full review. We're 4.5 years away from a general election.
Fine.
Let's use that time to get it right.
Thank you.
I've been getting